Welcome to Yell, Fight, Sooie, college football from three friendly-ish rivals.
And welcome everybody to this week's edition of Yell Fight Sooie. We're missing a little fight, but that's okay. If you watch Twitchy Dolphin Media stuff, you'll know that Mr. Jim Christopher has not been feeling great this week. And hey, he still isn't feeling great. So it's just me and Andy Tom Chesson. He's representing the Yell part of this. Andy, how you doing?
Look, I'm waiting for my new iPhone to come in. So the fact that I'm even here is a minor testament to how dedicated I am to college football and talking about how bad A&M is probably going to be this weekend.
I just want to know, do you keep your schedule written out in a pad as well? Because if I didn't have my iPhone, I wouldn't know where I'm supposed to be.
No, I don't even need pens in my life. It's annoying to me when I have to bring paper to things.
You like to etch it in blood, just a little blood, a little right here. You remember when
I have the phone? I can just type. Sometimes I just turn on the little microphone button. It records everything.
But if you don't have it with you, I don't know what to do. I mean, I would be lost, man. I wouldn't know anybody's phone number or anything.
Yeah,
Surely would not have known the dial-in for this. But hey, look, let's cover for Jim real quick. Texas, Texas did what they were supposed to do last week, kind of the way we thought. Kind of slow in the first half, pick things up in the second half, and look good and put away a decent Wyoming team that beat Texas Tech a couple of weeks before.
I mean, I'm operating off memory here, but Wyoming had a chance to take the lead in the fourth quarter, and they didn't. And Texas did what they needed to do, and they scored 3 unanswered touchdowns, and that's great. The problem is those first 3 quarters look like everything that Jim and a lot of my Longhorn friends were worried about is the hangover after a big win at Alabama, which, frankly, after Alabama's weekend, looks a little bit less impressive. Now, all credit to them, because I hope that we beat Alabama too. I hope you guys beat Alabama this year. But Alabama is not Alabama so far this year. And you compound those two things, Alabama and Texas. Alabama was in the lead at some point in that fourth quarter. Texas came back and won that game handily, decisively. Same script kind of against Wyoming, though, is that you struggle through 3 quarters, then all of a sudden you turn it on in the fourth quarter. At some point, you would think, and maybe it's going to be OU in 3 weeks for them, Texas is going to have to play well in the first 3 quarters of the game and not just the fourth quarter.
Well, yeah, and I do want to dig into that more as you talk about that, because it actually opens up a big, broader topic. But focusing just in on Texas for a moment, I mean, but the ability to still win that game, to still put them away, following even with the hangover, the win is really what you're looking for at the end of the day. And for Texas, you're 3-0 with honestly it doesn't look to be an incredibly tough schedule the rest of the way.
I think the Big 12, as much as they had a couple of surprise teams last year, I don't know that they have that in the league this year. Oklahoma looks like they've rebounded so far. Again, haven't played anybody, but they are showing signs of life on offense and defense and getting back to what you would expect to see an Oklahoma football team look like so far this year. But the next best team in that league, is it Kansas State? Is it BYU? I mean,
that's the very fair question. So let me ask you that. As you look at it right now, the Pac-10 has like 6 or 7 teams that are ranked. The Big 12 really isn't getting a lot of attention right now. Is this a case where, okay, the Pac-12 is garnering so much attention at the beginning of the year, but the Big 12 is actually playing a better brand of football with teams we're just not as accustomed to hearing, and they're going to get ranked by the end of the year, and the conference will look better as a whole?
I mean, it's week 3 or week 4 for some of these teams. I don't know that anybody can effectively answer that yet. I mean, if you were placing bets right now, history would tell you that the Pac-12 is probably going to fold up a little bit as the season rolls on. However, sometimes Oregon State puts together a good football team. It happens once every couple of decades. Maybe that's this year. I'm just looking at who is in the Big 12 as it stands right now, and there's just not a lot of meat on that bone. Baylor is down.
Way down.
TCU is not TCU.
Texas Tech looks down from where they've been the last couple of years.
I think there was Kansas State had some hope, and maybe they can, turn things around. But I don't think Missouri is a great team, and Missouri had that miracle win against Kansas State this past week. You don't know how long that hangover lasts on the other side.
Let me tell you, that is I'm. It's fun that you mentioned that because that game it epitomizes terrible clock management and a kicker with a great leg bailing you out at the end. Drinkwitz even said in his post-game presser that he mismanaged the clock. He got bailed out by a kicker that hit a 61-yard field goal. If you haven't watched that, everybody, go back and watch the Missouri-Kansas State game because it's freaking 61-yarder. I mean, the kid drills it right down the middle to win the game, but they get away with nothing. To your point, I don't think Kansas State is that great. I think they are very well coached. I think they have a good team overall, and their fundamentals, the fundamentals are definitely coached in Manhattan, Kansas, and you've got to beat them. They're not going to give it to you.
Berlin has so much to offer. Staying in a room at
Really?
Are we sponsored now? Fantastic. I will take my royalty checks in Bitcoin if I can.
Wow, we are sponsored. Apparently, an ESPN screen that has been in my background for about half an hour just decided to start playing video. So
Disney may have bought and sold this, so who knows? I think that's the story with the Big 12, though. You have Texas, and then you have Oklahoma, and then maybe Kansas State, and then I don't know how many other teams are in that league. 12, 13?
State, Cincinnati, yeah,
but none of them look.
And Oklahoma State looks bad this year too.
So yeah, Oklahoma State's really under it. It would. I think Gundy is one of those guys that I have assumed just kind of has tenure there. I think he might be on the way out, and I think you're seeing that he knows he's on the way out.
Yeah, well, hey, he's a man, and he's older than 40.
I mean, shit, he's nearly 60 now.
Isn't that crazy? But he said he was 40. Hey, let's talk about A&M. What did you find out about your team this
Nothing. Found out nothing. I don't know what you can. You can't find out anything against Louisiana Monroe, except maybe you didn't get whatever disease you thought you were going to catch.
Very bad.
You found out the penicillin works, my friend. That's what you found out. Louisiana Monroe is not, as we were talking about in our text chain, it's maybe one of the worst Division I teams that has ever existed.
Historically. I mean, historically.
This year they were 2-0 coming into College Station. They look competent. I think Terry Bowden, who I did not know was still alive, so bonus points for that, is a competent mid-level coach. Okay, like if somebody told you Terry Bowden was dead, you would go, "Oh, okay."
Yeah. I think of Terry Bowden and Samford together.
Right.
Samford. That's who I don't think of the 12-0 Auburn team he coached while under investigation or under probation or whatever. I think of Samford. I think of ULM. Look, but here's the thing. I mean, if you're Louisiana Monroe and you make a bowl,
sure.
All 11,000 people in Monroe, Louisiana, as they say it, they're going to come out and be ecstatic. But it doesn't help you as the A&M football team to figure out more about where your team's at or not at. But your defense, is it safe to say at least the defense looked really good comparing who you're playing, but they look really good in comparison to the previous week.
So the positives for me is that we rebounded. There wasn't the hangover, because you can have a hangover after a bad loss just as easily. And you could have a team that went 5-7 last year and here it comes again. And the effort level drops. You didn't see that against this game. This was a team that wanted to put away this overmatched opponent early, and they did. They ran their offense effectively. Their defense answered some things that they needed to answer. However, you answered against Louisiana Monroe. Part of the problem is Louisiana Monroe came in averaging 95 passing yards a game. How did Miami beat you? Well, they threw for 5 million yards. Miami, who ran the ball really, really well in their other two games, and some of last year only ran for 70 against A&M. And you would kind of expect that with the linemen that A&M has recruited over the past 3 or 4 years. Having said that, maybe Miami only ran for 70 yards because they didn't need to run the ball. There's some of that in play. So all of that's to say, I'm glad we won, but I don't know what it meant at the end of the day, other than it felt better than losing.
It felt better than losing. The team looked a lot better as well. I got to say, I thought A&M, I mean, you needed that. You needed that bounce back game, and you needed the bounce back game in the way that you got it with you didn't win 80-0, no, but it was still pretty dominant. The outcome was never in question.
I think it's always a good time for A&M when Max Johnson's in the game because we wanted him to be in.
Well, I will say this: the one position in Arkansas that nobody can question about is the quarterback. KJ Jefferson is great, but it looks like so here's the thing: we bring in a new offensive coordinator in Arkansas, and everybody's like, KJ Jefferson's going to get better. I actually think from a quarterback fundamental standpoint, he has gotten better. The team and the offense as a whole is not, and the offensive line can't block. And we knew they couldn't block against the run, and one injury happens, and suddenly, despite the fact that you've been rotating 10 guys through the offensive line throughout the first 2 games of the year, in the third game, one guy decides to get 3. Your team captain decides to get 3 holding penalties and can't block anybody on the left side, and so
he's a fifth year senior offensive lineman who was struggling mightily in that fourth quarter.
But he was playing tackle where he shouldn't have been. He's a center and a guard, right. And they shoved him out at tackle, and we got beat because of it. Arkansas had 2 leads in that game, 2 double-digit leads in that game that are 14-0 and 31-21 that Arkansas gave up. Lost the game, frankly, did not put the game away whenever they needed to. I think every Arkansas fan looks at this and goes, we had so much hope after Kendall Briles was leaving, and we were actually kind of glad that he was getting out of town. Sure. Not a lot of hope right now, and definitely not a lot of hope going into this week. There's a lot of questions in Arkansas and a lot of disappointment. For me, I drank the Kool-Aid. I know better, but I drank the Kool-Aid early this year because I thought I saw pieces coming together that was going to make this very good. But the bottom line, Andy, to your point that you've made last year and this year, if you can't block up front and you can't get a defensive push up front, doesn't matter how good the guys are you got behind them.
I mean, I don't think anybody's tuning in for original thoughts on football from us, frankly, but I think there are some axioms that 100% apply. Line play is going to determine who wins college football games 90% of the time. It just is. And one of the dangers that you face when you play a team, specifically BYU, people like to say, well, you play a team like BYU. It's specifically BYU. Their linemen are all 25 years old because they do recruit. They recruit very heavily through the Mormon community. Those kids come on campus for a year and then they go on a mission for 2 years. They come back and they're grown-ass men. And I don't care how good you are as an 18, 19-year-old defensive lineman or offensive lineman. It doesn't matter when you're facing grown-ass men. And that's what you saw a lot against Arkansas this week, was that your offensive line got blown up by some grown-ass men. And a lot of other bad things happened, and it was a confluence of bad things, but that's how you lose college football games. KJ Jefferson's not the guy who can do things by himself. I don't know if there are any quarterbacks who can win games just by themselves. I will say Johnny Manziel might have been able to win that game by himself.
Yeah, he's about the only one. I think KJ Jefferson's got too accustomed to being hit, bouncing off of it, and still making a play. He expects himself to do that at this point sometimes. It's a game Arkansas clearly should have won. It's a game that changes the outlook of Arkansas season very much. And for a lot of people that were thinking, oh, this is a 9 or 10 win season, it's now looking like, 6 in Memphis. Maybe we get 6 wins in Memphis again. It gets tiring after a while, though. I will say that much.
Well, I think also the schedule's not doing you any favors. I know we're going to talk about this week in a little bit, but losing that game at home makes this week tougher.
Absolutely. Night game at LSU, always fun. Hey, but let's talk about one other thing last week. It was in the news very much on Saturday night. It was in the news on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. It kept Colorado State. Dirty hits. Coach Prime pressers. Look, I think he handled his handled one press conference very well. Didn't know the name of his own center in one conference, but when you get 72 new players and
you can't keep track of everybody when you traded out 85 players a year.
Who? Oh, him. Oh, no, he did great. Look, I mean, the guy's not going to know immediately after a game how the center performed.
This is one of the, hey, this is one of the things you need to know. I know you're gonna make a point, but this is one of the things you need to know as a veteran coach that Prime's not quite there yet. Jimbo doesn't call guys by name all the time. There's a lot of times in the press conference he refers to number 6 or number 83, and that works because that could be a lot of guys on any roster. That could be 2 guys.
That's true. At least 2. It was kind of funny. You know, that was one of the gripes that Arkansas fans had about Danny Ford back in the early 90s. He didn't know any of his players' names. He knew their number. Oh, 52 is over there playing. He had no clue who anybody's name.
That's a great veteran coaching trick. I don't need to learn these kids' names. I just need to know their numbers. Just don't change the damn numbers.
He needed 4 years to be able to get the cattle ranch that he wanted, and he got it. But no, look, Colorado is the news this year, right? Sure. Everybody's talking about Colorado. So my question is this: have they earned it? Have they earned the notoriety they're getting, in your opinion, is the first question. And the second question, does that all come crashing down finally this weekend at Oregon?
I want to point out you accidentally just gave me a hook'em. Jim's not here. You don't have to.
Did I give a hook'em? No,
You did say number 1 and number 2. Don't.
One or 2.
Yeah.
Number 3.
There it is. Yeah.
1, 2.
And now you're into a shock.
I'll go back to the European.
It's fine. It's fine. I'm sorry to distract.
I was saying I love you. I think I was saying I love you. I just called.
I love you too, Scott.
I love you.
Yes, Deion's newsworthy. And I answered that question very specifically that way. Deion is newsworthy. I don't know that Colorado is as newsworthy as they are. Now, having said that, if I had a team that has barely scratched 3 wins out of season for the last decade, and I start out 3-0, I'm pretty happy. The national press would not care. They only care because it's Deion and because of how the summer played out. I think the shine comes off that. I know we're going to talk about games. They're about to step up in competition. Oregon on the road is going to be tough for them because I just don't think they have the depth to compete. USC is going to be tough for them. There's a few teams in the Pac-12 that look like they're going to put up a fight compared to who Colorado has played so far. Colorado State, and this is my issue. You're 3-0, but Colorado State's coach called you out and you struggled with them. Colorado State, we talked about the worst Division I teams of all time. Colorado State's got to be in that conversation because they're not good.
They're not historically strong.
And the only reason we're talking about them this week is because their coach talked about Deion. Matter of fact, if we keep talking about Deion, we might get more viewers. We should tag this episode just with Deion.
We should say something bad. We should have shown up with cowboy hats and sunglasses. It's what we should have done.
I don't talk to adults who wear sunglasses and cowboy hats, sir.
But kudos to Jay Norvell, seriously, for having a team that was really ready to play. Colorado State was ready to show up on that football field.
And Colorado State legitimately could have won that game. And then this is the danger for me for Colorado football and for the Deion love specifically. When he loses a game, especially a game he's not supposed to lose, they're going to turn on him quickly. Because if there's anything we love to do from a media standpoint, except besides set people up, it's tear them back down. And that's the next thing that's coming. You can see the media starting to circle, the sports media starting to circle about what that's going to look like. So that's going to be really interesting to see how that team handles a little bit of adversity. And I think they're going to get their first taste of adversity this week.
It's really interesting. A couple of things you brought up are very interesting. We already touched on the fact that the Pac-12 has a lot of teams that are ranked right now, but how good really are they? We'll find out. They are still going to be better than Colorado State and what Colorado has seen early on. It's just going to get tougher, as it does for everybody as they get into conference play at that level. But, yes, it's being talked about because of Prime, but can he lose that this year? I mean, even if they go 3-9 at this point, 3 wins is so much better. If that culture is still moving along and I don't know if there's a way that the media turns on him this year unless something bad happens. I do see it coming in the future. and them trying to get him in the future because we build you up so we can take you down. That's the way the media in the U.S. goes, and really around the world.
I think if he loses the next 9 games in a row, the turn will happen this year. The reality is, if they win 7, if they make a bowl game this year, that's a huge success.
Absolutely.
And anybody who watches college football or knows anything about college football will understand what that is. Will he get less attention at 6-6? Yeah. And I don't know how Dion, the person, responds to that. Dion, the coach, I've been very impressed with. I've never necessarily been in love with Dion, the person. And I think he is one of those guys that has a public persona, a private persona, and those two things are not always congruent. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. But the fact that this is our 4th episode this season, we've talked about Dion all 4 episodes. He's not in either one of our leagues.
He's the Spence. He's in Jim's. He's
next
in
year.
Next year.
Next year.
But hey, he's the new Spencer Rattler.
And you know what? I was going to commemorate that in our parting shot. We did not mention Spencer Rattler last week.
Last week we didn't have a Spencer
Rattler. That broke the string.
I know, and he performed kind of terribly. Well, actually, not terribly. They didn't look horrible at Georgia. But wrapping it up about Colorado and talking about Prime, I agree with you that as a coach, he hasn't done a lot. He doesn't have the resume yet to equal the notoriety he's getting. But he as a player, as a persona, as an Aflac commercial spokesman, he's done everything he can to get his name out there for sure. And like you said, I'm impressed with him too as a coach, and just I don't know. They look like they're headed in the right direction. But that's the Pac-12, and that's one more ranked Pac-12 team. And who wants to talk about that?
But I'll find out what they do Sunday morning because nobody stays up for Pac-12 games.
Well, and that is another thing. The Colorado State game went until 2:00 on the East Coast, and the ratings were still 5th best ever. It's insane, but it shows what a weird year it is, Andy. And you kind of touched on this as well early on. For the traditional teams outside of really Georgia and Michigan, they're ranked high and they're undefeated right now, but everything else looks a little strange. It does not look like the normal year to me. Bama, as you touched on, is down. The Florida and Tennessees of the world look down. Auburn, obviously, they're in a rebuild. LSU, we don't know what we've got. This looks like an traditional year, if you will. And I think the playoffs may see a ton of fresher faces than what we've seen in the past. Am I crazy for this? What are you seeing?
I think this is one of the unintended consequences of NIL and the free transfer rule that the NCAA put in place a couple of years ago, is that you are experiencing parity. And you're experiencing parity because players don't have to stick around and develop the way they used to. You could count on Alabama, and I'll use them as an example. Nick Saban's great on the recruiting trail. He's a tyrant once he's your coach. You love him after you've left. But if you ask any one of those players, besides maybe a handful, he is up your ass the entire time, and you deal with it because you don't really have any options up until, a couple of years ago. You could transfer, but you have to sit out. If you want to go to another SEC school, you have to sit out almost 2 years. None of that's true anymore. So you dealt with it. And that means that if you're Nick Saban, you've got junior and senior offensive and defensive linemen, and you're replacing them in spots with your young guys. And that makes those guys better, gets the experience, but you've got veterans. You're going to see teams that can't be veteran anymore. And because of that, it kind of it doesn't necessarily raise the other teams up, but it drags you down. And parity comes from whatever. It's not quite the old NFL rule because the money's not equal. But if Pete Rozelle had his way, every team would be between 7-9 and 9-7 every year, because that would increase the TV ratings and everybody has a chance to be in the playoffs every year. That was the goal for the NFL. It still kind of operates that way. I don't know that college football gets that way because there's such a giant disparity in money, but you're starting to see the talent distribute differently than it has. And you can't tell me that was an intention of NIL, but that seems to be what's happening.
Excuse me, just as I'm about to talk, I get choked. No, I agree with you on that. I think it's also interesting with the transfer rules how a lot of players that weren't developed when they came out of high school at the D2 or the FCS level, you're seeing them as fifth-year seniors or whatever transfer over into a group of five or a power five team. And I mention that because that takes one more spot away from somebody else who's probably 18. And instead of going to A&M or Arkansas because they're picking up a fifth-year senior, that freshman instead is going to one of those lower schools or something like that, just like you talked about, looking for money. It's a very unique situation that we're in right now that I still don't think the NCAA fully has their hands around. But to your point, it's leading to incredible parity. We've got significant ranked matchups in week 4. Lots of them, not just a couple, right? That we talk. Oh, it's Clemson, Florida State on Saturday night ABC. Yeah, all right, and that's it. No, you got Ohio State, Notre Dame. You've got Penn State and Iowa. You've got Oregon State and Washington State. You've got a lot, and it does come about from that parity.
If your name is not Alabama or Notre Dame or Ohio State and maybe a couple of others, but truly the blue bloods, you're not if you're not one of those teams, you're about to enter into what I think is going to be a golden age of college football from a on-field product. Because your team all of a sudden has a chance, even with a loss, especially when we get to a 12-team playoff, even with 2 losses, to still win the whole thing. And you can get an immediate infusion of talent. You can get talent from places you wouldn't have looked at before. A&M's got a guy, wide receiver, Ja'Day Walker, who came from, I have to look this up, Grand Valley State, who started for us due to injury, but started for us, had 117 yards and a touchdown last week. And will continue to play a role because he runs really, really fast. Not heavily recruited out of college because he wasn't developed well in high school. To your point, you're going to see more of those guys get that opportunity. Hell, Colorado's roster, not to go back to them, but half of their roster came from Jackson State.
Yeah.
Part of the reason that I think Colorado is going to struggle the next 3 weeks is because maybe one of the best players in college football, Travis Hunter, isn't going to be available.
Lacerated liver from that dirty hit. We really didn't talk about the dirty hit, but then yeah, I mean, I don't want to go back to the topic, but
sure, but you're going to see guys come from smaller schools. And Travis Hunter is a weird story because he was a 5-star that decided to sign with Dion. But you're going to see guys who get more opportunities who are the classic late bloomer, who in the traditional system don't really get those looks anymore. Now they do. Now they have the opportunity to basically treat Grand Valley State as a junior college and then go pick their SEC or Big Ten team they want to play for.
Yeah, Arkansas's got 2 receivers this year. One of them is from Hillsdale College, and the other one is from.
Isn't that where Denise Huxtable went? Hillsdale.
I think so. I think that's right. I think it is. Which I don't know if they met each other. I think they went there at different times.
It was a different world. I can tell you that.
Really was, man. And in the spirit of Dwayne Wayne, I will keep my glasses on. I don't know where to go with that. I just remember Dwayne Wayne and Sinbad on that show. That's all we need. Hey, look, let's talk about the week that's coming up. We've talked about enough in the past. It is a crazy year. It's going to be a fun year in college football. I'm absolutely convinced of that by the teams we see. Give me your thoughts on some games. The first one, since we've talked about them ad nauseum enough, Colorado at Oregon. What does that look like?
Again, I think with Travis Hunter being out, it being the first real road game that Colorado is going to play as a team with expectations, it's a little bit different going into, I guess, what is considered a hostile environment in the Pac-12. And I am being snobby right now. I don't know that they have real hostile environments in the Pac-12, but if they have one, Oregon's probably up there, right? It's like a 50,000 seat stadium. How hostile could that be?
It's all the different colors. They throw you off with the neon and the shiny.
Sure, and they've got a Nike store in their football. Great. You can do your shopping, get some new shoes, watch a football game.
They just come at you so fast, it messes you up.
I think even with Travis Hunter, Oregon out-talents and out-schemes. I think you've got better coaching than Colorado does. And so I think at the end of the day, Colorado asserts their dominance. Having said that, Dion has surprised every step of the way so far this year. So it would not be shocking to me to see them lose. I think the loss of Travis Hunter, though, is going to be a little bit too much for them to overcome.
Yeah, there and the us against the world thing only lasts for so long. It always
Right.
has shelf life, and then suddenly you become part of the world. I'm with you. I think Oregon takes that. Florida State, number 4, Florida State. Again, one of the shakiest top 5 teams I think I've ever seen in my life. But number 4, Florida State is going to Clemson, who looks totally lost. What happens in Clemson this weekend?
I think one of the bigger mysteries in college football is where did Clemson go? It, it's they haven't really stopped recruiting. They have basically the same coaching staff outside of Brent Venables. Offensive court. I mean, he has shuffled through a number of coordinators through
It's the
Dabo
stats
has.
largely the same. It's largely the same. I'm with you. There's not a lot that's changed.
And yet something is missing. So I don't know if it is the parity we've talked about. I haven't paid attention to how many people have transferred in and out of Clemson, or if just the rest of the ACC has caught up with them a little bit. Having said that, Clemson will still end the year with 10 wins somehow because they seem to always do that. They're just not winning the one that they need to win every year lately. I even though this is on the road in Clemson, I think Florida State pulls it out. I don't have a great feeling about Clemson this year being good at any one particular part of the game.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of confidence in Florida State, and this feels I'm not going on anything other than feel, but this feels like one of those things where Clemson tripped up earlier on, but Florida State's not good enough on the road to actually put Clemson away. I think Clemson actually pulls off a bit of an upset there.
I think Florida State's favored slightly. If the Florida State that played LSU shows up, I don't think there's any doubt that they're going to win. To your point, I don't know which Florida State's team is going to show up. And when you don't have that consistency week to week, which we're seeing against a lot of football teams, it's really hard to do these pick'ems. But I just think Florida State's got more momentum right now, and Clemson is a little bit of just not there.
Yeah, I kind of just missed the LSU result a little bit because Brian Kelly seems to always start the year slow and then doesn't finish the year like he wants to, but everything in the middle is like really, really good. And I kind of get the feeling that LSU is tracking that way this year. Oklahoma goes to Cincinnati. Number 16, Oklahoma, to your point, they're bouncing back. Cincinnati trying to establish somewhat of a foothold and make themselves important in the Big 12. Does Oklahoma just run them over in Cincy?
I mean, I don't. Cincinnati's sitting at 2-1. It is a home game. It is early, which Oklahoma is used to playing. They're used to playing those 11 A&M games. I don't see any way Cincinnati stays with Oklahoma the way Oklahoma has played so far this year.
I would agree. Number 22, UCLA is going east in the West. They're going east to Utah. Number 22, UCLA at number 11, Utah. Number 11, Utah's a physical football team. They always are. And they're tough at home. Yep. UCLA's got to go in there and try to pull out a win. What does that look like?
UCLA, I think, is fool's gold right now. They're ranked because it's early. They will fold as the season goes on, and I think the fold starts today or starts on Saturday.
Kind of the typical September UCLA ranking, and then in November you're like, oh wait, are they bowl eligible?
100%.
Yeah, it feels it kind of feels like it doesn't matter who the coach is there either. Since Terry Donahue left, whoever gets it, that's kind of their year. Like you start off and everybody talks about you in September, and then by November we're like, man, those blue and gold jerseys look kind of cool.
Yeah, it'd be good to see them in a big game. Never happens.
Yeah, poor Troy Aikman. Hey, look, here's the most interesting game, in my opinion, coming up this week, and that is number 15 Ole Miss going to number 13 Alabama. I say it's interesting because Alabama starting Jalen Milroe.
Milroe is back.
They didn't start him last week. They didn't play him last week.
He may or may not have been suspended. There's a lot of swirling rumors about why he did not play last week.
But he's back this week, and he's got Lane Kiffin coming to town, and Lane Kiffin's been having a blast on Twitter X this week with he and his dog Juice Kiffin going back and forth at each other. Ole Miss could really knock off Alabama, Andy.
I honestly think Joey Freshwater pulls out the win in Tuscaloosa this week. Ole Miss is not necessarily impressive, but I think the things that they do well so far Alabama doesn't have an answer for. Strangely, Alabama's secondary is subpar so far this year. We saw it against Texas, giving up deep bombs to Quinn Ewers, who, for all his talent, deep ball accuracy is not really his bag, and somehow he got real accurate in Tuscaloosa. I think you compound that with the fact that the Alabama offense is not the Alabama offense that we've been used to seeing for the last several years, and it's going to be a slugfest. And I think Ole Miss has enough firepower to overcome whatever Nick Saban's going to cook up for Lane. If there's any saving grace for Alabama this week, I think it's that Lane Kiffin struggles against his mentor. And I'll call Nick Saban his mentor. They, coached together for a minute. But I think Ole Miss wins this game, and I don't really think it's an upset.
You can call him a mentor because Juice Kiffin's Twitter account refers to Nick Saban as grandpa. So that's always fair. I'm with you. Look, I think this Alabama team looks a lot like the Alabama team that won a national championship, not allowing LSU to get past midfield. They don't have a lot of offense. I think they're going to get better as the year goes on because you have if they have some consistency at quarterback, I believe they do nothing but get better as the year goes on because they're going to have a young quarterback that's just maturing on the job, right? So I would expect them to look a lot better at the end of the year, but this could really be a year that Alabama ends 8-4, 9-3. They've still got LSU. They've still got Auburn. They've still got Tennessee. Alabama, they really look gettable this year as compared to years past.
Well, and I think the way that A&M beat them 2 years ago at home and beat Alabama, or should have beat Alabama last year, the way you beat Alabama in the last few years is being able to throw downfield. And I don't know how this happens with the way they recruit. Their defensive backfield has gotten worse. And if you can throw over the top, if you can throw downfield and spread out their defense, you're going to beat them.
I think that's interesting. The transfer portal that you were talking about earlier is a bit. I think you've given your own reasons why that secondary just isn't as deep as it used to be. They can't stash as many They can stash as many 5-stars on the bench, but those 5-stars don't want to sit around for 2 years and
they don't have to anymore.
They don't have to anymore. It is a changing landscape for sure. I think Ole Miss goes in. I think Joey Freshwater is partying in Tuscaloosa Saturday night. I really do. I think he'll have a great time. Go get him, Joey. Hey, Ohio State is number 6, and they go in to Touchdown Jesus Land Saturday night on NBC to face Notre Dame. Golden Domers, Buckeyes. This actually looks like it's going to be a pretty good game.
Yeah, I think this is really your game of the week. It's two teams that should be playing at a high level. It has all the pageantry of being in South Bend. Ohio State is probably the better team. Notre Dame is undefeated. They probably still have their ranking from being Notre Dame, though, because they always start off in the top 15 because that's just who they are. So I don't know exactly what you're going to get from Notre Dame yet. Having said that, I think that they hold serve. Ohio State's not quite as strong as they have been the last couple of years. So there's some flaws on both teams. Both teams should be playing at a high level, though. This is week 4. All the kinks should be worked out. So I think you're going to see a good football game in prime time on NBC in South Bend, but I think Ohio State pulls it out.
I think Ohio State has the better team like you, but crazy things happen under the lights in South Bend on Saturday nights. And this one just kind of has the feeling of an early season a bit of insanity. I think it's going to be a nail biter. I really do. And it's the one time of the year that I pull for Notre Dame. Also, I will throw out there to everybody, I'm not going to ask us to pick it because, frankly, Washington State is 3-0. God knows how. Oregon State is 3-0. The same person knows how. And they played.
Those two teams are going to be battling for the Pac-12 for the foreseeable future, friend.
Oregon State or Washington State is coming out of this week at 4-0. I think that is a news story in and of itself. But is
this a bid to get to be kings of the Mountain West? Is that what we're looking for here?
Pac-2, baby. Pac-2. Know what I'm saying?
2-pack.
2-pack. I like that. The 2-pack. Okay, let's let's look at this week. Jim's not here, but Texas goes to Baylor. They go up the road to Baylor. Baylor's terrible. Texas is going to not. Texas has a chip on their shoulder from last week's game at Wyoming. They're going to Baylor. I mean, the last time Baptist got beat up this bad, I'm sure it had to do with the Southern Baptist Convention or something.
Well, you're thinking about the Branch Davidians if you're talking about Waco, but
no, I'm not thinking about. I wasn't going there. I was just talking about Baptist. I wasn't talking
you
about.
don't have FBI folks watching this show, so it's fine. I don't see any chance for Baylor in this game at all. I think Texas does have to look good, though, or the question marks continue to start circling a little bit about what exactly is this team. They should beat them handily, but what I want to see if I'm a Texas fan is them to get off to a fast start, to get up to a big enough lead that you put Arch Manning or the other quarterback who's better than Arch Manning into the game.
Yeah,
really, not because Quinn Ewers got hurt or got a haircut or whatever.
It's really interesting because it is shaping up to be an imperfect year, and Texas is an imperfect team, but may have the perfect schedule.
Yeah,
as well. And so they take that imperfection, run this thing out, win the Big 12. And it wouldn't shock me. It would not shock me at all to see Texas make the playoffs this year, given how everything is. I think that could be a blessing and a curse to them as a program because the fan base is going to see that success the year before you step into the SEC. But again, maybe it's not all the same, right? Maybe it's not all the same because we live in a different world because of NIL.
Yeah, I think Texas hits a speed bump along the way besides Oklahoma, but I don't think it's Baylor this week.
No, it's definitely not Baylor this week. A&M this week. How are you looking for speed bumps?
I mean, we've done this for the last couple of weeks. What questions did A&M answer? And so far, they've had one test out of 3. They didn't answer well in that test. There was a failure in Coral Gables or Miami Gardens, whatever they're calling wherever Miami plays now. Auburn's going to be the first real test this season, and I guess the first real one that matters. They're at home. They should win. They have better talent. I will say that they have a better coaching staff than Auburn does, even though Hugh Freeze can work miracles. But they're going to have to play consistently good football for 4 quarters, and we've yet to see that. I think Connor Wegman is the answer as far as quarterback. I think it's good that you have that settled, and he's the man on campus. He's the guy that's going to win games or lose games for you, and most of the time he's going to win games. He is especially confident, especially accurate at home. He supposedly has Auburn circled from last year when they had to play in a little bit of a mess with no skill players. He had his top 2 running backs out, top 3 wide receivers out. I mean, it was a mess last year, and they lost by 3 points to Cadillac Williams Auburn team.
Right.
That was why they missed a bowl game, frankly. That game should have been winnable. I think A&M wins, but I want to see a consistent, solid effort. If you're talking about strategies, you're going to have to make Auburn beat you by throwing downfield, and you're going to have to defend the ball. We didn't do that against Miami. So if we can defend the ball that's being thrown downfield, I think we can stop the run. And I think Auburn doesn't have a lot of answers for that yet in their life cycle under Hugh Freeze. So I am cautiously optimistic for a win.
Yeah, I do think you get the win this week. I think offensively that Auburn doesn't have the answer for you, but the question, as you've said, does A&M have an answer for Auburn? And we'll see. I think you find out a lot about your team this week. Finally, I think you do. Arkansas goes to LSU and they play at night in Baton Rouge. Going to the Reds. Look, the last time Arkansas had good success at night in LSU, but not always. And this isn't the team. I think that Arkansas, the staff doesn't seem to, we got to fix a few things and tidy a few things up, and we just play. We were right in that game. We just got to change a few mindsets and get receivers to hang on to the ball, blah, blah. But I think it's deeper than that. I think there's fundamental flaws with how this team blocks on the line, and until the offensive line is fixed, we can't run the ball, and KJ Jefferson's going to be going crazy in the backfield trying to elude LSU. I think it's an ugly night for Arkansas fans tomorrow night.
The good news for you is that Brian Kelly's defensive crew can insist on putting Harold Perkins in the middle where he's not effective at all as a defensive player. So if there's hope, KJ Jefferson gets to the outside and there's nobody there because they've tied up their best defensive player with a bunch of offensive linemen. Having said that, based on what I saw against BYU this week, I don't know that there's the the offensive consistency, and I would be really worried about stopping LSU's offense right now. I don't think Jaden Daniels is a good quarterback. I don't think they have a good downfield passing plan, but I think they have enough to keep Arkansas's head kind of on a swivel with just basically different play patterns and being able to mix it up enough and having enough talent in different places to cause you guys fits this week. I think it's a bad matchup in Baton Rouge on a Saturday night. It's going to be hot. It's going to be steamy. And not that it's not that way in Arkansas, but it's Bayou steamy, friend. And those coon asses will have 9 hours to be drunk.
Oh, they'll be hammered drunk. Grandmas will be flipping you off if you're wearing red, and their grandchildren that they're pushing in the stroller will be as well. He's Andy Tom Chesson. I am Scott McIntyre for Jim Christopher, who we hope is back with us next week. This has been
Feel better, Jim.
Of Yell Fight Sooie. Feel better, Jim. And yeah, I think we've covered everything we can cover. Andy, thanks for being here with me today. Good luck to you this weekend, I guess. And I just hope Arkansas doesn't die.